Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all good and welcome if you're new. I'm Leah. So today I've got a bit of a story time for you guys about how we brought our third and fourth investment property, the old cafe. I've honestly been meaning to film this video since October. I've just literally been slacking, but here we are today, the story time of how we brought the cafe. And also, if you haven't seen the tour of what the cafe looked like, then make sure you check it out. I'll leave the link down below. So back in January 2020, so pretty much a year ago, we completed on our second investment property, the old office, and then we wanted to pretty much start looking for the next one straight away because we just want to make sure the pipeline is always strong. So we were like, okay, we've completed on that purchase, now we need to start looking for the next one. And our strategy with every new property we want to take on is to basically like double up. So we want to double the size, double the time, double the cost and things like that. So for the old office, we paid 125,000 for it. So then we were thinking for the next one, we want to be paying like around 250, like around that mark. So it's actually really cute because the cafe is on the same street as our first investment property, and like all of our properties are literally so close together, like literally not even a 2-minute walk away from each other. Like they are literally so close together. But the cafe was actually on sale when we brought our first property, like way back in 2018. So literally this property was on for the longest time. So we did actually notice that the cafe was for sale when we were looking for our second investment property, but because the price was quite high, we just ignored it and we were like, no, there's no way that we can buy that. So all this time we're seeing the cafe, but we just keep ignoring it because we're like, nah, the price is too high. And then one day we properly read the description and we realised that it had a house attached to it, which was pretty much like a 4-bed HMO. And then we were like, no, we could easily convert that into a 6-bed HMO. So then the cafe started to seem a little bit more attractive. We were like, okay, maybe we need to go and look at this, because we were thinking we could easily get like a 2-for-1 deal kind of thing. So we rang the estate agent and we always like to ask them like, how long has it been on the market and has it had much interest? And then the estate agent said to us that it's been on the market for a long time. They've had no interest, no one's made an offer or anything. And we were thinking, well, if it's been on for a long time, they haven't had any offers, hopefully there is going to be some room for negotiation. And yeah, so then me and Mom went to view it, and then we could tell that the cafe side could easily be converted into a bungalow, and then obviously the HMO side could easily be a 6-bed HMO. The HMO that was already there was already in good condition and it already had like 4 ensuite rooms. So we just needed to create 2 extra en-suites because we like for our tenants to not have to share bathrooms or anything like that. So we just needed like 2 extra en-suites, and then we just needed to do like cosmetic work to get it up to our standard and how we like it. But it was nothing structural, nothing major like the other refurbs we've done. It was literally just like a cosmetic refurb. So we had a fairly good idea of how much the refurb would cost for the house and like how much it would cost to bring it up to our standard. The only thing we weren't sure of was the cafe, because we'd never converted anything like that before. So then we brought our builder along for a second viewing before we made our offer, just so we knew exactly what we were working with. I know a lot of people ask me about estimating refurb costs before putting an offer in, and for us on the first few projects we've always taken our builder on the second viewing so that he can give an estimate of the refurb cost, because obviously we didn't have a clue how much a refurb cost like when we got started. Like we just didn't know at all, because, well, we'd never done it before. So yeah, we always took our builder with us for the second viewing just so that we knew our refurb estimates were like accurate and things like that. As we've become more experienced in refurbs now and we've done like back to brick refurbs and things like that, we are fairly confident with estimating how much the refurb would cost, like depending on what the project is. If it's something that needed like major structural work that was like anything worse than like what we've done before, then we would still get a builder to come with us to help us estimate the refurb cost before we put the offer in. And the offer that we'd put in would be subject to the survey, but if it's anything cosmetic or it just needs a bit of like internal restructuring or anything like that, then we can estimate that because we've done it before. So yeah, we have the previous experience. So we did the numbers, and after a bit of negotiation we agreed on an offer of £232,500, which was subject to the pre-app. So a pre-app is something you can do before you put in a full planning application, and they'll let you know the likelihood of you actually getting planning, and they'll offer any advice. So we were pretty confident that we would get full planning on the cafe because everything on that road is residential. Like I said before, our first HMO is on that road and it's just pure residential. And also because we'd gone through full planning before on our second investment property, the old office, I think that kind of gave us a bit more confidence, and we just had experience of going through the whole thing, so we were just like, yeah, like pretty sure we'll get planning kind of thing. So there is obviously always a risk with planning that your application will be rejected and they'll say no, But by doing the pre-app, then obviously this reduces the risks and they can tell you why they wouldn't support it and things like that. So yeah. Right, so I'm going to give you a bit of background now to the planning uses of the cafe. So originally the cafe was actually a pub, and the pub was brought by some local social workers who basically wanted to provide a place for vulnerable adults to live and work. So they were going to live in the HMO but then work in the cafe, hence why, you know, it is what it is. Well, it was what it was. So in terms of the house side of the property, that was classed as C2. So that's for things like care homes, boarding schools, hospitals, nursing homes, residential colleges, things like that. So that's C2. So that's what the house side was classed as. And then the cafe side was classed as A3, which is basically just restaurants and cafes. But because it was one building with one title, it's looked at as a whole. So it's classed as mixed use. And when it's mixed use like that, you can't use permitted development the same way you would as if it was separate buildings, just because they look at it as like the whole building kind of thing. So yeah, we needed C3 on the side that the bungalow was, and then for the HMO we needed C4. But I do have a whole video that talks about HMO planning permission in a lot more detail, so make sure you go and check it out. I'll leave it linked down below. So getting the pre-app. So the process just involves filling out a short form, getting some drawings done, and it only costs a few £100s to apply for the pre-app. So we basically use like a CAD/architect person to take our rough drawings that we do on floorplanner.com and turn that into actual to scale drawings that we can send to the planning office. So we only needed to send drawings and plans for the ground floor and the elevation plans. Elevations is basically the outside, and it's like the front, the side and the back of the property, so they can see what you're doing. But yeah, the drawings just basically had to show how the cafe was going to be converted into a bungalow and where like bedrooms were going to go and things like that. And for the house side, it basically had to show where the new bathrooms were for the new bedrooms. The other great thing about pre-apps is that basically all of the same council departments that would have a look at your full planning application are consulted when you do the pre-app. So say for example like the highways department, the environmental department, the fire department, whoever else, all of them, they're all consulted and they can all have a look and they have to all comment on it as well, just like they would for a normal full planning application. So you're really getting a full insight into what would make your application successful, what would make it get rejected and things like that. So definitely worth doing. So we sent off our pre-app application and we hadn't heard anything from them for like 4 to 5 weeks. So then we ended up having to chase the planning officer because they hadn't really followed the full process that they were meant to. She was really hard to get hold of. She wouldn't return our calls, nothing. We just couldn't even get in touch with this planning officer. But then she was basically ready to send us an email to say that they wouldn't support the application because of some objections from highways about parking. So we basically ended up escalating this to their manager so that they could have a look into it. And then at the same time, we got in touch with one of our unofficial mentors to give us advice on how to deal with the query that had come in from highways. Then the manager basically came back to us to apologise and said that really, you're supposed to have like a full consultation and you're supposed to have like a full sit down conversation with them for them to explain why they wouldn't support it and then other things that you can do to improve. Whereas she was just ready to like send us an email and be like, yeah, bye, like it is what it is, you know what I mean? So yeah, he did apologise for that. And then it turned out in terms of the highways objection about there not being enough parking, that there was actually a sufficient amount of parking because we were so close to town. So there didn't really need to be like that many parking spaces, but there is definitely enough parking spaces anyway, but okay. And then after that situation, he said that they would be happy to actually support a full planning application. So yeah, we kind of knew that like applying for planning that we probably would get it because they all said it was fine before, so buzzing. So once we knew that the planning would be sound, we started looking into our finance options. So I'm going to say this is like the end of February / the start of March in 2020. So our finance broker at the time basically wanted to introduce us to what was essentially a private investor, and this investor basically wanted to work with like a handful of developers who already had like a little bit of experience. So it was kind of sounding like the relationship with the investor was going to be like a long-term ongoing thing, and we were both really excited. Then the situation with the Rona started to get a lot worse at that time, and then the private investor basically pulled out and he was like, no. Then after he pulled out, our broker brought us another option, which was basically like a small investment firm, like a very niche kind of thing. So we started going down that road. They organised a valuation, which all came back fine. We had a couple of finance offers, but because of the Rona, things just kept changing like all of the time. They were coming back like really expensive and the LTVs were were awful. But yeah, at that time it was just really difficult to actually pin down any financing. Different products were getting dropped, lenders were pulling out, and then they'd re-enter the market the next week with like new criteria. It was literally just changing all the time. So this just led to like major delays. So at the same time as trying to sort out the finance, we also made a start on the full planning application. So we actually did the full planning application ourselves. We did it without a planning consultant. We did use a planning consultant before on our second property, the old office. However, they were a bit rubbish, so we ended up doing a lot of the work ourselves, and we ended up dealing with the planning office directly ourselves. So it was kind of like, what's the consultant even doing? So that gave us a bit of confidence, I guess. So yeah, we thought the planning application would be pretty straightforward, and also our unofficial mentor does his own planning applications. So we were kind of thinking, well, if we get stuck, then obviously we can ask him for advice. So yeah, you do all of the planning and all of the submissions and everything like that. You do that all online, and then it goes through what's called a validation. So they basically just check that everything's okay, like all of the drawings are okay and things like that. We did have like a couple that needed changing and updating, but no big deal. The thing that we learned about doing our own planning applications is that you really have to think about the national planning policies, and also think about the guidelines that the government have issued out about town planning. And you basically need to be able to interpret that to your area. And then you also need to have a read of your town council or local town parish planning strategy. So in ours it said about things like affordable housing, and then also an ageing demographic. So we thought, okay, they're definitely going to support a bungalow if there is an ageing demographic in the area, and they've already said that within their town plans. But yeah, for a HMO / small development, like getting your head around planning isn't that difficult as long as you've got time for it. Obviously you can get a planning consultant if you want, but they do cost a few grand, and if they're going to do like the drawings and the measuring and things like that for you, then that could easily cost like 5 grand. And also we had already gone through planning before with a consultant, so we kind of knew what we were working with, if that makes sense. So yeah, but yeah, I definitely think that learning about planning gives you a nice little advantage. So we were actually recently listening to Mike and Victoria's podcast, Inside Property Investing, and they were interviewing Danny Farrow and Hein Lingenfelder from the Momentum Investment Group, and they actually said something that which we completely agree with. And they basically said, if you want to do commercial conversions, you need to kind of like get a grasp of planning and learn about it. Otherwise, like, how can you make sensible offers? Like, how can you know what you're offering on if you don't really have an idea of planning and things like that? So like, definitely like learn, you know. Obviously I'm not saying like become an expert and become like town planner level, but like you've got to have like a decent grasp of like planning and how things work and things like that. Otherwise you'll turn up to like viewings and places and things like that, and it'll be like, oh well, what can we do here? Do you know what I mean? So yeah. But also of all of the specialisms in your power team, so like your accountant, your solicitor, your builder, etc., planning at this level just isn't as like specialist kind of thing. You can definitely get a grasp of planning for small schemes and HMOs because it is literally just basic common sense. Obviously I'm not saying that there isn't any risks at all, because you have like town councillors and neighbours who can put their 2 pence in for your application. So like on the old office, we had one of our neighbours say like they would prefer to see the property turned into flats. Do you know what I mean? It's like neighbours can just say what they want about your application. Really, it's nothing to do with them, but that's another story. So yeah, obviously there's a risk there, but the actual theory behind it is just common sense. Anyway, so when I filmed the tour of the cafe, I mentioned in that video that we already had tenants lined up when we completed. So I think it was in like August, we actually had a local employer reach out to us, and they got in touch with us on Spare Room, and they were basically asking if we had any availability in any of our HMOs, because they had some staff that they were recruiting and they basically help out with their accommodation. So they came and viewed the 2 HMOs that we had at the time. They were really impressed, they really liked it, and then they basically just asked if they could have the 6th bed. So we looked at their timescales and agreed a date that they would move in, and the date that they were going to move in, that was in like November, and we were thinking we'd complete on the purchase like in September. So we were like, we have got plenty of time to do this simple cosmetic refurb, like we've got loads of time. So leading up to the completion, the process was getting really held up by our solicitors. It was also getting held up by COVID because searches were taking a lot longer to do, and the finance was also on a go slow. So we just had to keep looking at like where it was stalling, and then we just had to take action to make sure that like the whole process was moving, because we were like, we need to make this deadline, like we just need to make the deadline for the tenants. So we decided that out of everything, the finance was really the one that was holding it up the most. So we were like, right, what can we do? So we got in touch with our first investor who invested in the old office, and we were like, would you be interested in investing in the cafe and investing in us again? And he said yeah, that he would invest with us again, so we were absolutely buzzing. But yeah, going with our investor, we got a much better LTV and just like a better offer generally, because obviously we were dealing with someone that we've worked with before and he knew us, and the whole process was just way better working with him. Like the way it sped things up, like I can't even tell you the way that working with this investor just sped things right up, like good times. And then we just basically had to like say to our solicitor, like, look, we need all of the queries like spelled out, like what's wrong, what's the hold up, like what's happening. And then we just got all of the queries like chased through, got everything sorted. We agreed on a completion date of the following week and then we completed. So yeah, the whole process of buying the cafe literally took us 10 months. So it was like, yeah, January to the end of October. So it was a long time, eh? So literally pretty much as soon as we completed, the refurb had to start on the HMO. I did do like a whole little renovation video on it. I'll leave it linked down below. But yeah, the refurb pretty much started straight away. We still haven't actually started the refurb on the bungalow. We've just like left that. But yeah, we actually finished the refurb on the HMO side like nearly 2 months ago now. So yeah, as I mentioned before, the HMO was actually pretty much ready to go. We just needed it brought up to our standard and our brand and things like that. So we just needed a couple en-suites, bit of paint, new flooring, all of that. So by now, because of all of the delays that we had, we ended up having to complete the refurb in like 12 days. And we just didn't want to mess up the relationship with the employer. So we were like, we're just gonna have to cut back on a few things, but we need to just get this refurb done. The overall plan of what needed doing was we needed 2 en-suites fitting, a new kitchen fitted, we needed new flooring fitting, and then obviously we have like feature walls and things like that. So that all needed doing. So we got the keys on a Friday, and then Saturday morning we had someone come and fit the laminate upstairs. We ended up taking a wall down so that we could end up making one of the bedrooms bigger. If you watch the house renovation video, then obviously that makes more sense. So yeah, we ended up taking one of the walls down so that we could make the bedroom bigger. And then we had to have some stud work put up as well for the ensuite. Then on the Monday, the decorators started painting the rooms upstairs where the laminate had already gone in, and then the existing kitchen was ripped out. And then on that same week, we had luxury vinyl tiles fitted in the existing bathrooms that were there. And then we also started on the first fix plumbing and electrics for the en-suites. So our first few delays happened because we couldn't get a plumber in time, and then the electrician was a day late. And because of all this meant that the plasterer was late. So it was basically just a massive domino effect of like, because this person was late, it pushed the whole thing back. So yeah, the whole thing was just like a massive rush, like a rush to get all the flooring down. We ended up having like 2 decorators at one point. Like it was just, it was a lot. It was a lot. In the like second week of the refurb, that's when furniture started being delivered. So all the beds, the wardrobes, ladder desks. We also ordered mattresses, which ended up not turning up on time, which we were just like panicking, driving around trying to find mattresses. And then pretty much in that second week, the second fix electrics were all done, but the second fix plumbing hadn't been done. So the en-suites, like they didn't have like toilets, they didn't have showers, things like that, like the second fix stuff. But yeah, we actually ended up missing the original deadline just by like a couple days because yeah, we didn't have en-suites and things like that. So like, I think the original deadline was like on a Thursday, and then they gave us like the weekend to finish everything, and then it was fine. But yeah, that is basically the story of the cafe. I feel like that is one of like the longest but craziest projects ever. I mean, we've still got the bungalow to go, so that hasn't started yet. I think I mentioned that before, but yeah, the renovation on the bungalow hasn't started yet. Hopefully it'll start in the next couple of weeks, but I'm gonna do like a full bungalow renovation video so that you guys can see like the week by week updates. So hopefully that's given you a bit more of an insight into purchasing the cafe. If you found the video useful, then be sure to subscribe and give it a big thumbs up. That would really help me out. But thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it as always, and I'll see you next time. Bye.